Korg padKontrol. It's a drum pad controller with 16 pads, USB power to hook right up to your computer, or you can use the optional 9-volt AC adapter and plug it in with the MIDI ports to your external gear. There are MIDI in and out ports, as well as a switch to change from USB bus power to AC power. The pedal input can be used to send a control change or a note message. There's also an XY pad, which gives you very dynamic, expressive control over the sounds you're triggering. Each one of the 16 super sensitive pads is illuminated. Notice that whenever you play the pads, the velocity shows up in the display on the upper left. Notice also that you can hit a full velocity of 127 on the very corners and edges of the pads. This is the most sensitive pad controller you can buy. There are 2 assignable knobs at the top of the pad control. You can set them to affect any number of the pads, and you can have them send any control change message you want. The XY pad allows you to add roll and flam effects, and the hold button lets you remove your finger from the pad while still maintaining its position. The pad is also a freely assignable XY controller, similar to our popular Chaos pads. The padKontrol has 2 modes, play and setting. When you press the setting button, it lights up and one pad is selected for editing. To edit a different pad, just touch it. In the parameters section, there are 6 different things you can modify for each pad. The first is note or control change. We can see on the screen that this note is A3. Just turn the dial to select a different note for the pad to play. Or you can set the pad to send any MIDI control message. You can choose individual MIDI channels for each pad, so you could have this pad set to MIDI channel 1 and this one set to MIDI channel 2. If you press the switch type button, you can set a pad to be either momentary or toggle. The next button is release value. If a pad is set to a control change message, it will send a specific value once you take your finger off the pad. Next up is velocity. Each pad can have a fixed velocity from 1 to 127, or you can choose from 8 velocity curves. Each curve has a different response depending on how hard you play. For example, you could set your kick drum to a velocity of 127 and keep the snare velocity sensitive, with a curve that matches the way you play. The next function of the padKontrol is very useful. It's called port, and you can choose from port A or port B. You could set the bottom row of pads to port A and the top 3 rows to port B. The reason you do this is because when you plug in the padKontrol with USB, it shows up as 2 separate MIDI devices, so you can route it to 2 different pieces of software at the same time. Using setting mode, you can also make changes to both axes of the XY pad, the pedal, and the 2 assignable knobs. Once you're done changing settings, you can save it as a scene. The padKontrol can store 16 scenes internally. One scene has settings for all the pads, the XY pad, the knobs, and the pedal. You can recall a scene by holding down the scene button and pressing one of the 16 pads. If you use the included Editor Librarian software, you can store as many scenes as you'd like. There are several convenient shortcuts located right on the front panel of the padKontrol. If you need to send a MIDI message, like a panic message to stop all the notes from sounding, just hold down the message button and press one of the pads in the top 2 rows. If you want all of the pads to have a fixed velocity of 127, there's a button called Fixed Velocity that does exactly that. You can also perform program changes by holding down the Program Change button and turning the dial. When you get a padKontrol, you'll also get the padKontrol Editor Librarian. There's a picture of the padKontrol right on the screen. And if you want to modify something, just click on it. If you click on a pad, for example, you can see piano keys to help you choose a note. You can see the velocity curve and every other parameter that we just explored. When you're done, you can save the scene, or an entire set of scenes, and transmit them to the padKontrol itself. We want to make sure you have something worth controlling, so we've included a Korg edition of DFH Superior. It's over 250 megabytes of fantastic drum sounds that you can use right out of the box. Whether you're a seasoned producer or someone just starting to make beats, or you just need a controller for anything with MIDI, the padKontrol is a perfect solution.